You spend your entire adult life running from one feeling, the sinking, embarrassing, gut-wrenching realization that you are fundamentally a broken knockoff. You call it imposter syndrome. You call it self-doubt. You call it anxiety. But those are just the symptoms. The actual sickness is far more insidious, and it costs you everything. Your career trajectory, your peaceful relationships, and the quiet satisfaction of just being enough. And here's the painful truth nobody wants to tell you. Your inferiority complex isn't a character flaw. It's an unprocessed memory, a scar from childhood that you've tragically tried to hide by strapping on a suit of emotional armor so heavy you can barely move. And that armor, which you think is protecting you, that's what's destroying your relationships and stalling your life. Stick with me for the next 12 minutes, because I'm going to show you the secret recipe not to eliminate your pain, but to transform that inferiority into the most unique source of power you have. We all know the wound. Maybe it was a parent who was never satisfied. Maybe it was a teacher who called you average. Maybe it was just the crushing, constant pressure of social media, reminding you that you don't look like that or travel like them. So what do? We become performers. We try to prove loudly and constantly that the wound isn't there. We become the person who never admits they're wrong, the person who uses $5 words in meetings to sound smart, the person who posts those carefully filtered, aggressively perfect photos to convince strangers that their life is a highlight reel. We are so terrified of appearing weak or inadequate that we overcompensate, creating a rigid, brittle shell around us. And this is where the real trap lies. When you live in fear of your inferiority, you spend all your energy defending yourself against attacks that haven't even happened yet. You stop seeking connection, and you start seeking validation. You stop communicating, and you start performing. Think about the last truly meaningful conversation you had. Was it easy? Was it fluid? Or was it stiff? Did you feel like every word you spoke was weighed and measured, designed to convey competence rather than genuine thought? The original wound, the inferiority, hardens us like a stone. It doesn't just hurt us, it turns our relationships rigid and cold. You can't connect deeply with someone if you're standing behind a bulletproof shield of manufactured success. That shield isn't just protecting you from criticism, it's blocking love, opportunity, and genuine intimacy. The typical self-help advice for inferiority is toxic garbage. Just be more confident. Embrace the hustle. Power pose. This advice fundamentally misunderstands what inferiority is. It's telling a man with a broken leg to just run faster. When you try to fake confidence, you are just painting the outside of the armor a shinier color. You're becoming an even more proficient performer, which means you are moving further away from authenticity. And guess what? People can smell inauthenticity like a cheap knockoff perfume. Imagine a simple scenario. Someone offers you praise, saying, "Wow, you did an amazing job on that presentation." The person running from inferiority hears this and thinks, "They must be wrong. I barely pulled it off." If they knew the truth about how scared I was, they wouldn't say that. This is why compliments often feel uncomfortable. It's because the compliment threatens to shatter the protective facade you built. If you accept the praise, you feel like a fraud. If you deflect the praise, you feel ungrateful. Either way, you are left alone, isolated by the stiffness of your own defense. So, how do we dismantle the armor without exposing the soft, terrified core underneath? The answer is counterintuitive and requires radical humility. You don't fight the inferiority, you define its borders. The secret cure isn't about eradicating the feeling of inadequacy, it's about realizing that your sense of inferiority is actually a precise, highly detailed map of where you were hurt. It tells you where your boundaries are, where your communication gets stiff, and where your defenses automatically kick in. Here's the simple, practical shift. Instead of trying to hide the wound, we must learn to identify the specific area where the insecurity originates and acknowledge it. Inferiority is broad and general. It makes you feel like you are universally bad. Healing is specific and surgical. It acknowledges that you are simply deficient in this one specific area right now. Let's say your deepest wound comes from feeling unheard. You believe, subconsciously, that your opinions are stupid. When you go into a meeting, you don't just feel generally anxious. You feel inadequate about your voice. Your armor kicks in. You either shout over people or you say nothing. The cure is to identify the boundary. Instead of trying to prove you are the smartest person in the room, you acknowledge the flinch. You might say to yourself, "I am incredibly insecure about presenting this data because my parents always dismiss my ideas. I feel small right now." But that feeling is based on a memory, not the reality of this room. You communicate the specific limitation, even if only to yourself. This is the key. Healing comes when you can separate the specific deficiency from your overall self-worth. A man who struggles with public speaking is not a failure of a human being. He is just a man who needs practice speaking in public. This isn't just a mental exercise. It's a relational discipline. It's about taking the stiff, internal armor and turning it into flexible, external boundaries. When your spouse asks you about a household task and you feel that familiar rush of defensive inadequacy, instead of snapping back, try this. I feel really sensitive about this because I keep messing up this specific task. I need to figure out a better system, but I need you to know that when you ask me that way, my first reaction is to get defensive. You have just done 3 powerful things. First, acknowledge the wound. Asterisk, asterisk. You validated your internal pain, the inferiority. Second, specified the problem. You shifted it from "I am a bad person" to "I am bad at this specific task." Third, provided the boundary. You told the other person how to communicate with your vulnerability. When you specify your pain, it shrinks. It stops being a massive, suffocating cloud over your entire life and becomes a small, manageable project. The secret ingredient isn't confidence. The secret ingredient is precision. The world doesn't expect you to be perfect. The world expects you to be honest. The moment you define the specific, narrow place where you feel inadequate, you strip the inferiority complex of 90% of its power. Think about the people you truly admire. They aren't the ones who pretend to have everything figured out. They are the ones who are profoundly capable of acknowledging their weaknesses. Why? Because when a person can admit where they are limited, they immediately become trustworthy. They are communicating that they are done performing. They have dropped the armor. That rigid shell of defense you carry, that stiffness in your communication, that is the energy you waste every single day running from a version of yourself that doesn't even exist anymore. The minute you stop running, you free up all that energy. This is how inferiority becomes your superpower. Your history of feeling inadequate means you are hyper-aware of imperfection. You can see flaws, gaps, and deficits that genuinely confident people who have never felt truly lacking might ignore. You become meticulous, not because you are trying to hide your failure, but because your past pain has given you a relentless drive for detail and excellence in that specific area. Your wound is your training ground. Your inferiority is simply a reminder that you know what it's like to start small. And that capacity for growth, that precision born from pain, is a force multiplier in a world full of shallow, performative fakers. You were not put on this earth to be a flawless copy. You are put here to be a singular, unique original. Stop hiding the scars. Define the map. And watch what happens when you finally embrace the perfectly imperfect, powerful person you were meant to be.